right, so back to the weaponization of the federal government so far. Most of this has just been them smearing Trump, but hopefully they'll get back to the issue at hand, which is that poor employee who had his security clearance suspended and went without pay for over 2 years. So hopefully they'll get to some kind of conclusion for him
on this subject, and we're not going to get an answer to it until after the election, potentially after the inauguration. I find the irony astounding, and it's not Mr. Horowitz's fault. It's the folks of the Justice Department who are taking their time with this report. I appreciate the gentleman's question. Now yield to the gentleman from New York or California.
John, you want
California.
me to go?
New York, excuse me. I'll do whatever Ms. Plaskett says. Okay, New York.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Here we are again for another hearing about the same topic. And I want to say I appreciate the concerns about how the FBI addresses and investigates whistleblowers or retaliates against whistleblowers. And we've had a number of hearings on this in this committee. And Mr. Horowitz, I'm glad you are looking into it. That is your job, and that's what you should do. But let's be real. This is the weaponization of the federal government subcommittee. Whistleblower retaliation is peanuts compared to a future president using the power of his office to imprison his political adversaries simply because they oppose him. That is the ultimate weaponization of the federal government. And we don't have to question whether or not Donald Trump will do this in the future, because we know how this story plays out. We've seen it, and he's done it in the past.
These guys making $175K a year, avoiding to pay this man the $50K owed to him. Exactly. They just went on a tangent about how Trump is going to do the thing that is happening to the guy that's there right now. He's sitting right there. When we're talking about weaponization of government, he's in the room. Trump's not president right now. Deal with the task at hand. Get this guy his money. He probably makes more than $50K though. What was he? Intel analyst or something for the FBI. He probably makes a little bit more than that. He's got some back pay coming to him, that's for sure. He might have to wait another 4 years to get it, but it's coming. We have T-Mobile cellular internet based for $50. That's not bad. It's not bad, but fiber will rock. Yeah, fiber is going to be way better. This guy just called the whistleblower not getting paid peanuts. This guy's a total dick. Exactly. He's right there. And he's talking about the same damn issue. But they want to characterize it as Trump being the guy doing the bad thing, because right now Biden is the one who is in charge, but the guy is getting his clearance suspended under Biden. So they want to kind of like brush it off. Oh, this is just one guy. What we need to focus on is Trump in the future, if he gets elected, how he's going to replace all the people on the in different like cabinets and whatnot. Can they do anything to get him his money? They're not going to do anything. They're going to make him wait another 4 years.
I want to introduce an article from last Sunday's New York Times entitled, "As President, Trump demanded investigations of foes. He often got them. He has threatened to target his perceived enemies if elected again. A look at his time in the White House shows how readily he could do so." Let's just go through some of the things that Donald Trump did when he was president the first time. James Comey testified that Trump asked him for a pledge of loyalty and then requested that Comey drop the investigation of former National Security Advisor Michael Flynn. Comey refused. Trump fired him. Trump also fired Deputy FBI Director Andrew McCabe because he oversaw an investigation that Donald Trump didn't like, just days before McCabe would have earned his full retirement pension. Trump then demanded that the IRS investigate Comey and McCabe, among others. Well, that's not all. At Trump's direction, the Justice Department dropped its case against former National Security Advisor Flynn, who had pleaded guilty to lying to the FBI. Mr. Kirshner, in your 30 years of experience, are you aware of any other situation where the Department of Justice withdrew a case after a defendant, had admitted to the conduct under oath in court?
I am not.
Let's move on. Donald Trump pressured overtly the DOJ to reverse its sentencing recommendation for Roger Stone. After Stone threatened to cooperate against Donald Trump, Trump granted him clemency. John Durham wasted millions of dollars on a baseless and fruitless investigation into the origins of the Russia investigation because Donald Trump demanded it. And it got so bad that Mr. Durham's...
Those guys already testified to this committee before. Why'd they bring them back then? If they've already said their statements, you think they'd be done? I guess just to have them there, to question them more. Maybe it's needed. Didn't they impeach Trump over false Russia ties? Yeah, they did actually. I have it. This is Wikipedia, the first one that came up. So I don't, you can probably get a better source than that. But it does say that the alleged Russia collusion was part of the impeachment process. So yeah.
Number 2 resigned in protest to Durham's plan, pressured by Bill Barr and Donald Trump to publish an interim report on the investigation shortly before the 2020 election in gross violation of DOJ policies. That's not all. Trump tried to install Jeffrey Clark as Attorney General because he acknowledged to the president that he would do his bidding and fraudulently try to help him overturn the election. But this is the one that really gets to the nub of this. And Mr. Levitt, we're talking about First Amendment, infringement on First Amendment rights that you are alleging has happened to these FBI agents. You would agree, would you not, that writing a book is protected speech under the First Amendment?
Sure.
So let me just give you a hypothetical scenario. Somebody pleads guilty to a crime. He's sentenced and designated to serve his sentence at home. He is asked by the Department of Justice to sign an agreement saying that he would not write a book.
They did, but the Senate declined to convict. Okay.
He refuses to do that. As a result of his refusal, the Department of Justice throws him back into jail in solitary confinement. Is that, in your mind, the weaponization of the Department of Justice to infringe upon First Amendment rights?
I'm not a First Amendment lawyer, Mr. Goldman.
Well, you said this is all about a First Amendment infringement.
Well,
why are you testifying about that if you're not an expert? The answer, because my time is running out. Excuse me. The answer, because my time is running out, is that actually happened by Donald Trump to Michael Cohen. A judge intervened immediately, reverse the decision because it's a gross violation of the First Amendment. It is a gross abuse of power of the Department of Justice, and Mr. Cohen was let out. But this is who now has complete immunity to do this as much as he wants without the guardrails of Don McGahn or John Kelly to stop him from doing it. This is going to be the danger of the weaponization of the federal government. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. The gentleman from South Carolina is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Horowitz, your office published advisory memo 24-067 entitled The Justice Department's Compliance with Whistleblower Protections for Employees with Security Clearance, and noted how you found that the DOJ was not in compliance with whistleblower protections for employees with a clearance. Is that correct?
That's correct.
What policies exactly did the DOJ fail to follow?
So
finally, we're back on topic here.
The law requires for suspension and revocations of security clearance that the department have an appeal process allowing, after 1 year of suspension, to come to the Inspector General and appeal that process. That was not in place at the time.
Does it concern you that the DOJ, that certain DOJ components like the FBI indefinitely suspend employees without pay for the duration of a security investigation and review process?
It does, which is one of the issues we also raised in that management memo.
What is the average length of time for one of those investigations?
So we found in the report that for the 106 employees that we looked at over a 5-year period who had been suspended for more than 6 months, that the average was 527 days. So about 17 and a half months.
So about a year and a half, roughly.
Year and a half.
So in your work, have you seen similar delays or similar lengths of time in other agencies?
We have within the department in other components, law enforcement components.
Well, what concerns me too, at least with the pay issue, the DOJ and FBI's current policy forces employees to remain in kind of an indefinite state of limbo without pay.
Right. That's exactly right. And that is the concern, Congressman, that goes actually beyond whistleblowers. Mr. Allen ultimately was able to get a settlement because he was a whistleblower alleging retaliation. But that same issue applies to people who don't have a whistleblower claim, but have nonetheless had their security clearance pulled.
I just think it's remarkable to me. I mean, just to hear Mr. Allen's testimony earlier about what he and his family went through, pulling out retirement, life savings, things like that, just to stay afloat. And fortunately for him, he was able to settle, but he might be the exception and not the rule. Is that fair to say?
That's correct. Most people or many people we've seen have resigned or retired rather than wait 2+ years.
Yeah, that's what I was surprised about, how he was able to keep this job for over 2 years and not get any money, but he kept going. I wonder what kind of duty they had him on with a suspended clearance, because obviously the job that he was hired to do with the clearance, he's not able to perform. So just curious what he was doing in those 2 years.
Can I add one clarification on the settlement? It was not because of his whistleblower claim, or the settlement's related to that, but the restoration of his security clearance was because of just an appeal of the revocation. So that was not tied to the whistleblower claim or to the settlement for the back pay. The FBI explicitly said, we're not giving you back this clearance just because there's some settlement. They make an independent security determination. They determined he was entitled to it.
Correct.
Thank you. Furthermore, the memo found that DOJ policy doesn't hold the legal requirement to the extent practicable that permits an individual to retain their employment status while their security clearance is in review. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Does the DOJ's failure to follow this policy concern you?
It does, which is what led us to issue the management alert. The department did respond and has since changed its policies so that there is that 1-year appeal. The other thing that they've done, which is not required currently, but is certainly something that I think Congress should consider, is requiring components, department law enforcement components in particular, to consider whether there are paid jobs people can be in without the clearances, even if a clearance suspension is warranted, so that you don't have this situation where someone gets put out unpaid leave or paid leave not working either, which has been another problem, by the way, at the department over the years, is putting people on paid leave for extended periods of time so they're getting a paycheck without having to work.
Based on your office's findings, do you think that the senior leadership within the DOJ or the FBI were aware that their policies did not follow federal legal standards?
I actually, my sense is they were not aware, because when we started this process and went to them, they did not seem to know about this issue, or weren't aware that their policy fell short on that issue, I should say.
Your office made 4 recommendations to the DOJ to address the concerns cited in your memo. One, what were those for the record? And 2, to your knowledge, what steps has the DOJ taken to implement those recommendations?
So the 4 recommendations were: 1, to make sure there was this 1-year appeal process; 2, to notify employees of their right to this process, because obviously you can have a process, but you shouldn't have to have an employee rummage through a lot of policies to find it. 3rd, when there is a suspension, look to see if there are positions they can go into where they can continue to maintain their position while performing work, even without the suspension, if that's the plan. And then 4th, put in place a review to make sure that these are being done timely. And so,
So half of these people are fighting for Mr. Allen. The other half don't want Trump in office per fear of either getting fired or possible retaliation for all the shit they did to Trump. And I think Paul had a good point when he was saying that they're not arguing for Mr. Allen because they believe that he should actually get his clearance suspended. So that's kind of what they're going back to, the Trump issues, to kind of paint him in a bad light, to say that this was justified, Trump bad, all that kind of stuff.
You don't want a situation either where if they can find another job with the security clearance suspension pulled, that they somehow indefinitely stay in that other job. You want them to have that resolved. If they shouldn't be in the job, they should leave, right? Then if it was an unfair suspension, they should be put back to their old job.
The person sitting on this guy's left is thinking this is the worst business trip ever. Yeah.
And have they taken those recommendations?
They have. Those? And I think very importantly is the requirement that they report regularly to department leadership as to why that hasn't occurred in a timely way.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Gentleman of California is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and for the witnesses, thank you for your testimony. I want to take this in a slightly different direction. Most of the focus has been on the Department of Justice, as is appropriate. But most of this is history. My concern is tomorrow. My concern is what might be in our future.
So again, screw that guy not getting paid. We don't care about him and his peanuts.
Project 2025 is a roadmap that the Republican administration may use should Trump win the election. And in Project 2025, there are many things to be concerned about, most of which happen to do with the weaponization of the government, the whole of government, to carry out an agenda. I want to focus on one part of Project 2025, which really hasn't been discussed much, but really should be paid attention to. And that is the redesign of our national security apparatus, putting all senior military officers and career intelligence officers through a loyalty test. And what that might mean for our nation should that come to pass. We can debate whether it would come to pass or not. The election will have something to do with that, but also the willingness or the unwillingness of the new administration to undertake that. What would a loyalty test mean for the military? It wouldn't be their ability to conduct the necessary programs for our national defense, but rather their loyalty to the president and the president's agenda, which may or may not have anything to do with national security. We have some history here that might be useful. For example, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff would not carry out President Trump's political agenda. Certainly willing to carry out the military national security agenda, but not the military agenda. And that earned Chief of Staff General Mark Milley the opportunity for the president to call for his execution.
Military had the loyalty test when they enlisted. Yeah, they're pretending like these military officers probably aren't going to follow the president no matter what. And from what I've seen, doesn't matter who's president, it's blind loyalty. We follow the president of the United States. That's just how shit goes.
Now, if Project 2025 is the roadmap for the Trump administration, and the Trump administration demands a loyalty test for our senior military generals, colonels, and career intelligence officers, what does that mean for the nation? Posse comitatus is often used, but I believe this committee has from time to time taken a look at the emergency powers of the president, which basically can waive nearly every law. So we may wind up, given Project 2025 and the loyalty tests that seem to be embedded in it, with a military that is capable of involvement in domestic affairs, and an intelligence community that's supposed to be looking outside of this nation, involved domestically. So the combination of the current very long list of emergency powers that the president has, together with a loyal military hierarchy and a loyal career intelligence community that is loyal to the president, not necessarily loyal to the Constitution or to the history of our democracy. What could it mean to our nation? A military that is...
God, this guy must take forever ordering how to drive through. Yes. Yeah, I was thinking I'm not really a big fan of him, actually.
Is used domestically for political purposes. An intelligence community that is looking inward. Project 2025 presents a very serious challenge. 5 seconds. I'd like all of you to ponder what this would mean. Is it a problem? Mr. Kirshner.
It is, and what I'm reminded of, Representative, is after I graduated law school and I was sent to Army Law School, the JAG school on the campus of the University of Virginia, one thing that was drilled into our heads is you must obey lawful orders, but equally important, I would say more important, you must disobey unlawful orders. Project 2025 would wipe out that second command, which is more important than the first command, and the danger can't be overstated.
I appreciate the forbearance of the chair for that 25 seconds.
Gentleman's time. The gentleman yields back, and the chair recognizes the gentleman from Ohio, Mr. Davids.
I thank the chairman. It's disappointing that
Jasmine Crockett is my personal favorite in Congress. I think I remember her from the DNC. I think I watched her speech. Again, with the 25 BS, holy, yeah, they're going to keep going on about this stuff. 3 years of hearing the left say you're dealing in what ifs. That's all they're doing now. Yeah, pretty much they're preparing for Trump to win. Even though Trump supposedly doesn't have anything to do with Project 25, and it's just a way for them to spin a narrative, but you know.
That we need this hearing. Mr. Allen, I want to apologize for what's happened to you. Our country should treat you better.
Thank you for the apology.
Thank you for your long career of service to our country. And I just wanted to ask, your experience spans a couple decades. And so over your time in service to our country, just confined to the FBI, what kind of changes? You know, I think the perception back home is the rank and file people at the FBI are people that we want to be there, that we want to support. And frankly, there's not a lot of trust in the current leadership system. And when you ask questions, a lot of my constituents had the exact same questions, and others did. So thank you for taking the courage to just ask an honest question. And the way that that was treated is shameful. And we're here today in part because of that. And frankly, Mr. Horowitz is continuing a 3-4 year long, hopefully imminent report that answers the exact same question. So how have you seen the FBI change as someone who moved up through the ranks?
I would say that, unfortunately, in my experience with the culture at the FBI, it's very easy for leaders there to kind of impose their wills on their subordinates. It's a culture where there are a lot of careerists and blue flamers who'll do what they need to climb up the charts and the ladders. And if that includes burning other agents or subordinate employees to get to where they want to get in the organization, whether that's for power or money concerns, that's something I've observed in the culture of the FBI since. That doesn't surprise me at all for the FBI. I would kind of expect that to a certain extent. You could say the military is the same way, and that's just the type of people you deal with, you know, when you're in that career field. I started there in 2008 as a contractor, worked for a couple of years, and then I got on officially with the Charlotte field office in late 2015. So I'd like to say that this is, from my personal experience, a sea change, but from what I've seen, there have always been vain careerists within the organization who will destroy people in order to climb the charts.
So safe to say we're not always promoting the best and brightest.
I would concur with that statement.
How do we need to change the culture to get it back on track?
I think there needs to be more accountability, and there needs to be a high focus on moral and ethical behavior within the organization. And I think outside checks and balances via policy change where the Bureau isn't allowed to simply just review their own conduct, to truly have an external watchdog force that can actually cause punitive change and enact measures in the organization. I think that's a big part of it. That's what I would advocate for. But I know a lot of the folks that join the FBI, they get into it and it's not quite what they expected once they get on the inside. So there's a lot of cultural change just from the historical culture of the place that has to change. And I'd like to tell you that I'm shocked that this is where the FBI has come today. But frankly, I'm not shocked at all that this kind of lawless conduct could have occurred within the walls of the organization.
Yeah, sad, but I've heard it from many other people, and frankly, you felt the blunt end of it. And again, hopefully we can make this right swiftly, and you serve out a good career there. Thank you for your service.
Thank you.
Mr. Horowitz, in another way, you've done things that my constituents appreciate. You've provided oversight and accountability, and the oversight and accountability function of Congress seems to work. The public finds out about all kinds of things, but they're just so frustrated because at the end of the day, Congress just shuts up and cuts the check. We don't provide reform. We don't provide accountability. Instead, you see people like Mr. Veltri promoted, somewhat validating Mr. Allen's observations, and trusted, as it turns out, with critical investigations. I mean, we saw the FBI. I hope there's an investigation underway on the events in Butler, Pennsylvania on July 13th. Is there an active Inspector General overview of that?
I actually don't have jurisdiction over that. My understanding is the DHS Inspector General.
Inspector General Kufari does. And as SIGI, the Integrity Committee, you formally directed that. They've tried to target people, even as Inspector Generals. Did you feel sometimes limited or coerced because of how SIGI has changed their behavior over the years?
Yeah, let me just say I was the chair of SIGI, not the chair of the Integrity Committee, and by law that
is separate.
Distinction. Congress has separated those two, but the Integrity Committee is part of SIGI. Look, I've dealt with issues at the Integrity Committee. I think there are improvements that certainly need and can be made, both internally and through legislative action, that would improve the process. But I do think, and I've worked with folks there, that they have tried to exercise their responsibilities, the chair of the as members of the Integrity Committee, as best they could.
Well, one thing we absolutely have to do is we have to change the way it's funded. Right now, they're harvesting cash from other agencies, including extra money. And so Congress needs to take action, in particular with funding. My time has expired, and I yield back.
The gentleman yields back. Chair recognizes the gentlewoman from Texas, Ms. Crockett, for 5 minutes.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair. And I'll pick up maybe a little bit.
Is that your girl, Paul? I think that's her, right?
Where my colleague just left off, and the question was about Butler, Pennsylvania. I'm curious to know if any of you are aware as to whether or not the FBI is involved at all in determining what's going on in Springfield, Ohio, because as far as I'm concerned, there is domestic terrorism afoot, and it is at the word of the Republican nominee and his running mate. So do we know if anyone is checking into that on the federal level? I'm just curious.
Bruh, come on. Domestic terrorism? Come on. Are you serious?
Just a yes or no, anybody?
I don't know.
Turn this camera off.
Perfect. Either way, I want to move on, and I want to talk about Mr. Kirshner. I'm just curious, if you were to define what weaponization of the federal government looks like, just in a quick, short definition, what would it be?
using the Department of Justice to reward your friends and your criminal associates by delivering pardons after they'd been convicted by juries or before their case was even concluded or before their case was even charged, and conversely using the Department of Justice to punish your perceived enemies, order investigations and prosecutions, even if they're not warranted by evidence. I'm sorry, that was not brief.
That's okay. It was accurate. Because that's how I see weaponization as well. And it's something that we saw a lot out of Trump specifically, because all of his friends were going to prison, and he's probably got more friends that are headed to prison soon. And if we are lucky, he will find him a cellmate soon as well. But nevertheless, as we talk about weaponization, because this whole committee feels as if it's projection, I want to go to something that's pretty interesting, but I'm gonna start with Mr. Allen.
Every committee is a campaign committee, apparently. Here, my campaign platform. Yeah, pretty much that's what this entire thing has been. They haven't came to any kind of resolution at all. It's just been them campaigning the entire time. And then once in a while, they go back to that poor guy. Oh, by the way, we didn't forget about you, you brokey. The memes are funny, but they fucked that up. Or they fucked that community up really bad. Yeah, okay, we can agree that maybe they shouldn't have said it. We could, I don't know if it's true or false. I don't care, to be honest. It's silly. It's a silly thing. But domestic terrorism, bro, that's a little extreme. That's some campaign talk. That's what that is.
I wasn't on this committee the first time you were here, so this is the first time we're interacting. But I am caught up to speed, and I have a simple question for you, yes or no. Do you believe that career employees like yourself should have your job taken away even if you've done your job well and followed agency rules? Do you think it's right to be fired just because you have political disagreements with those above you?
Oh.
No, it's not right to persecute anyone for their political or religious beliefs, especially in an organization where there's supposed to be the free flow of ideas.
Okay, I appreciate your answer and your honesty, and I absolutely agree with you. It is interesting, though, because that's exactly what Trump and my Republican colleagues would do if they won the election.
What? Come on, the dude is broke. Why are you doing this? Can they do anything to get the dude his money if they wanted to? I mean, this is the committee where they're talking about weaponization of the government. They should be forming some kind of plan to stop the thing that just happened to him. That's what they're there for, not to spend 2 hours talking about what Trump may do in the future for a platform that he doesn't even claim.
It's spelled out in Project 2025. Trump would strip due process rights available to career civil servants and remove, suspend, or reduce their pay in an all-out effort to oust agency employees for partisan reasons.
And he's just over there like, hey, I'm dipping into my 401k. I'm getting double taxed by the government because I'm early withdrawing just to feed my family. Help, please. But Trump,
rather than because of issues with merit or performance. And before you say Trump and Project 2025 aren't affiliated, I'd ask unanimous consent to submit into the record Trump's campaign page, where he claims on day one, I'd reissue 2020 executive order restoring the president's authority to fire rogue bureaucrats, and I will wield that power very aggressively. The only reason democracy is standing strong today is because we had public servants who pledged loyalty to the Constitution and rule of law and not to Donald Trump. Mr. Kirshner, your testimony today demonstrates you're familiar with Project 2025. Is that a fair statement?
Particularly as it pertains to the Department of Justice.
Okay. And you are aware, or maybe you're not, we'll see, on page 547 that Project 2025 states its goal of implementing a top-to-bottom overhaul of DOJ that, quote, must include the FBI, because anything less would, quote, guarantee the failure of the conservative administration's agenda.
That does not make a lot of sense to me.
Okay, but that's in Project 2025.
It is
okay.
Yes, it is.
All right, just wanted to clarify that. And also this agenda includes, for example, enforcing federal criminal laws against providers and distributors of abortion medication, as well as rescinding policies that hold that sex discrimination includes discrimination on the basis of sexual orientation, transgender identity, among other things. Is that correct?
Yes, Representative. On page 562, they talk about aggressively going after prosecuting, quote, providers and distributors of abortion pills that use.
They're going to go on and on about this, even though that's not the topic at hand, but whatever. I bet there was a Democrat staffer handing out 25 talking points at the door. This sounds all staged by the Democrats. I'm sure they all got together and they decided how they were going to make this into a campaign ad. Like I said before, I think they're paid to be in these positions to promote certain ideas. I think that's where their money comes from. Also, they were told it wasn't true by local officials who begged them to stop, and Trump is still spreading that shit on the regular. I mean, there's also reports that says it is true. So we're kind of in a place where we don't know what's true. And to be honest, it's silly. So who cares? Either way you look at it, saying somebody eats pets, to me, is not being a domestic terrorist. A domestic terrorist is someone who bombs a school. That's a domestic terrorist. Me saying you eat dog is not a form of terrorism in any way you look at it. And to say that is to paint something in a way to draw emotion to it, to make it seem drastic, more intense than what it is. And it, to me, makes her look silly. Really silly. That's not domestic terrorism. That's coming from a place of privilege, is what that is. Someone who has no idea what actual domestic terrorism is. Talk to the people that just dealt with pagers blowing up on them. That's some domestic terrorism.
The mail. So folks who are, mailing abortion pills to women who need it, that is really not what is endangering our country or inspiring violent crime.
I absolutely agree. This week, the New York Times reported multiple instances of Trump trying to weaponize the DOJ to retaliate against his political enemies, finding that, quote, Mr. Trump told Mr. McGahn that he wanted to order.
Right. But she's saying that, okay, if Trump ordered bomb threats, that would be domestic terrorism. Saying that they eat pets is not domestic terrorism at all. I could see, if Trump was like, hey guys, we're going to call in some bomb threats on a school, that would be domestic terrorism. But there's a huge difference from saying, oh, these people are eating cats and dogs. That's completely different.
Mr. Sessions, the Attorney General, to prosecute Mrs. Clinton and Mr. Comey, and if Mr. Sessions refused, he would take matters into his own hands. I know my time is running out, so I just have to ask, Mr. Chairman, given you've convened this hearing, theoretically it's you, given that you've convened this hearing on weaponizing federal agencies, will you commit to publicly condemning Trump for attempting to weaponize the government and condemn Project 2025 for its efforts to do the same?
Gentlelady's time has expired.
What's worse, Trump saying it out loud or the media left taking it as a talking point for a month straight? Both are insane, but I think the media exaggerating it daily is making it worse. Yeah, so if Trump saying that is domestic terrorism, then the media repeating it is also domestic terrorism. I mean, we got to lump it all together, right?
And I recognize myself for 5 minutes. And Mr. Allen, I'm going to give you a little notice. You've written some notes. As far as I'm concerned, you're the person I'm most interested in hearing from. I'm from Charlotte.
Not just eating cats and dogs, but stealing people's pets, which was debunked. Same shit, same thing. That's still not domestic terrorism. I can look at you right now and say, you stole my dog. That doesn't make me a terrorist in any way.
I know I've been to the Charlotte field office. I know some people there. I was extraordinarily impressed by you and the other whistleblowers when you previously appeared before the subcommittee. I'm impressed by you again. I haven't been able to be here the whole time. I'm going to yield you some time, just if you have things that you wish to say in just a moment. But the first thing I'm going to say before I do that, and then I'm going to give Mr. Jordan the rest of my time, is I'm just overwhelmingly troubled by the fact that no one seems to be able to do much about what has happened to you. You got the Inspector General, very respectable person. You've done a lot of things that have been historic, but you issue a management alert. And to me, it sounds ridiculous to say you don't think these guys at the FBI, the senior managers, understand that they shouldn't retaliate against somebody by putting them under extreme personal hardship while they engage in a completely baseless persecution over their security clearance, and they leave them in limbo for 27 months, and to this moment haven't paid what I understand to be the consideration under the settlement that's been reached. That is astonishing. And if that's not astonishing enough, that all you can do is issue an alert, Congress does absolutely nothing. In the majority party, not one thing to impose on the Department of Justice or the FBI an appropriate sanction for what they've done. And we have a hearing about it, and everybody in the minority party, they're fearing what Donald Trump would do in the next administration while they sit here and they look at the guy who's been persecuted by the FBI.
This dude
and
gets
everybody
it.
in the room understands it. Mr. Allen, do you have comments you wish to make? I'll give you about a minute and a half, and then I want to turn the rest of my time to Mr. Jordan.
Yes, sir. I would just say that I consider the hearing today my last act of service as a public servant for the United States of America. And I'll give you my professional opinion. I was an intel professional for our country for many years, and I would give recommendations, and I'd also look at indications and warnings. So I would offer this to the American people as my warning to them. Since this is a warning to the American people, I say, I personally have no confidence that the FBI will rein in its own conduct. I've been persecuted along with Garrett, Steve and Kyle, and countless other whistleblowers. It is my opinion that the Bureau used reprisal and fear to control the workforce. It has been a seemingly effective tactic. I personally believe that there are no current effective checks and balances against them conducting lawless action with any type of correction in a legitimate time frame. I welcome the work of the IG, but I think any type of lawless action, there's no legitimate time frame to rein them back in. Their ability to overclassify information can allow them to stonewall forever. To the American people, you have a duty as a citizen to vote, and I strongly urge you to do so. It's how you participate in the American experience. I know people have doubts about election integrity, but you must vote. It is your claim. Stake your claim and don't forfeit it willingly. Have your voice heard. My other recommendations are in the natural order. First, vote. The second is the Second Amendment. Arm yourself and know how to defend yourself. Make 3 to 4 friends in your neighborhood and promise to come to each other's mutual aid in times of hardship. And during the Great Depression, people stocked up a pantry. So I think that's a good practice, especially in our economic times, and make sure you have 3 to 4 months of food. And as a person of faith, I'd say pray the rosary. Go to the First Friday devotions. That's for everybody, all my brothers and sisters of all faiths, and I know I'm Catholic, and read the gospel of our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ, and live it every day. And that's all I have to say. Thank you for the time.
You know, Mr. Allen, the fact that there are servants like you who have borne up under persecution that a lot of political leaders in this country do not care about is the thing that heartens the American people, and I'm confident the American people will resolve the situation no matter how weak Washington is in response. Mr. Jordan, I'm sorry I didn't reserve much time for you, but I yield to you.
Thank you, Mr. Allen, for those well-said words. Mr. Horowitz, did you ever request permission from the Deputy Attorney General to investigate attorney misconduct in Special Counsel David Weiss's office?
He messed up saying he's quitting. He's never getting his money now. I mean, what other option does he have? He can keep working a job and not getting paid. At least if he quits, he can get unemployment.
I have not at this point asked for that authority. As we've engaged on this issue in the past, it's, first of all, not clear whether we have that authority. I'd have to have that discussion. But secondly, while the prosecution was ongoing, it was my view, consistent with our policy and practice, to let that prosecution play out. And then...
Do you have concerns?
I think there have been a number of legitimate concerns raised. Yes, Congressman.
Your time has expired.
Gentleman yields back. Chair recognizes the gentlelady from Florida, Ms. Wasserman Schultz.
I didn't catch his name.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, Donald Trump's Project 2025 is...
Oh my God. They were just called out for the shit. What are you talking about?
Attack on women's reproductive freedom and health care. And one of its most effective assaults on our rights comes from its call to criminally punish healthcare providers who distribute FDA-approved abortion medication by mail. This would effectively end access to a safe legal procedure that 2/3 of American women who seek an abortion
She brought a chart. She full on brought a chart.
Rely on. And how would Trump's Project 2025 do that, Mr. Chairman? By weaponizing our federal government against women and doctors. The most corrosive attack would direct the Justice Department to ban the mailing of abortion pills by enforcing an obscure 1873 obscenity law called the Comstock Act. You heard that right.
But unemployment on no income for 2 years, he'll get $150 a week. Maybe he can pivot to a new job that doesn't require a security clearance. Well, I mean, they did say they reinstated his clearance, right? So maybe he could just go to a different job and hopefully get paid.
151-year-old obscenity law. Mr. Kirshner, could reviving this 19th century statute and weaponizing DOJ to enforce it block a clinician from sending abortion pills to patients?
It could.
And yes or no, could it stop the manufacturers from even delivering mifepristone pills to clinicians and pharmacies?
It seems it could.
Trump's Project 2025 directs the Justice Department to start using its surveillance powers to monitor these pill makers and goes so far as to name them in their blueprint. Mr. Kirshner, could that kind of shadowing result in medicine companies being targeted and harassed?
Yes.
Could weaponizing the Justice Department to enforce this Civil War-era law, in fact, create
The guy had to move it just to try and get Trump's face in there.
a de facto nationwide ban on mifepristone?
It could.
This isn't about politics. This is about control. It's about denying women the ability to make decisions about our own bodies. It's about putting Donald Trump and J.D. Vance right in the exam rooms of doctors and millions of women. It's about punishing and even jailing doctors who provide compassionate care or loved ones who help you obtain
If you hate Trump so much, why would you put his giant ass head on a poster? Well, they want people to associate these crazy policies with Trump. When they see Trump's face, they want people to think about these policies. It's just basic marketing.
the health care that you seek. Mr. Kirshner, I want to ask you about another way Trump's Project 2025 would weaponize our government against millions of women and doctors. The medicine we're talking about, mifepristone, has been deemed safe and effective by the FDA for over 25 years. Women in nearly 100 countries have safely used it for decades. Yet, Mr. Kirshner, Trump's Project 2025 would require the FDA to, quote, revisit and withdraw.
Except for that one chick that we just saw on Oprah who died using it. And hasn't all these points been debunked by Trump himself? Yeah, he's literally said time and time again that these are not my policies. I have nothing to do with Project 25, but they keep running with it. They keep saying these are his project policies.
Its initial approval of mifepristone, falsely claiming without evidence these drugs are dangerous and should be illegal. Would that Project 2025 agenda be based on sound medicine, science, and facts? Or would it be a blatant weaponization?
If you say it enough times, enough people will believe it, and you'll influence people on how they vote.
Of the FDA.
The latter, and it sounds like it's based on politics, not on science, not on medicine, and not on what is best for women and the decisions they have to make with their doctors.
Thank you. The FDA recently allowed certified brick-and-mortar pharmacies to dispense mifepristone and doctors to prescribe mifepristone via telehealth, which expands abortion pill access, avoids added costs or stigma. But Trump's Project 2025 calls for the FDA to reverse that guidance, despite the Supreme Court recently rejecting that argument. It goes even further by eroding the privacy protections of abortion patients by promoting prosecution for women who take the pills. Could this weaponization of our government agencies obliterate the privacy of those who obtain or dispense abortion pills?
It could, and it's dangerous.
Project 2025's assault on our basic freedoms doesn't just stop at women's health. It undermines the safety of whole regions of our nation. Before my time expires, I'll quickly note that Trump's dangerous Project 2025 proposes to eliminate the National Weather Service in its entirety. I'll remind everyone that we have Hurricane.
That's why she emphasized it so many times. She has to say Trump's Project 2025. She has to say that as many times as she can.
Helene, who is quickly approaching the shores of my state. This is the very agency responsible for helping us prepare for and respond to climate change-driven natural disasters. Right now, Hurricane Helene bears down on Florida, and it's the National Weather Service that provides critical forecasts that help warn and keep our communities safe. Let's be absolutely clear. Project 2025 is not about reform, it's about control. Whether it's women bodies or the agencies that protect us from disaster, Trump's Project 2025 would erode the freedoms that we all take for granted. We cannot allow Trump's dangerous agenda to strip away our rights and leave millions more vulnerable than ever. Whether it's criminalizing healthcare providers or dismantling the National Weather Service as more hurricanes threaten our coasts, Project 2025.
He didn't distance himself from the Heritage Foundation until the plan got put on blast. Yeah, I don't think anybody knew about Project 25 until it was put on blast. So there was no reason for him to try and distance himself. Thank you, Chairman, for the time. I'd like to pivot from Project 25 to Project 25.
Is an existential threat to our nation's core values and safety. We will not let this agenda undo everything we've fought for, because we will not go back.
Let's see if you're right.
I yield back the balance of my time.
Let's see.
Gentleman yields back. Chair asks unanimous consent to enter into the record a coalition's letter on reforms that are needed. The letter is addressed to Chairman Comer, Chairman Turner, and myself, Ranking Member Nadler, Raskin, and Himes. Without objection, that will be entered. Chair now will recognize. Recognize the ranking member for as much time as she'd like. I'll give you 6, 7 minutes, 8 minutes if you'd like, and then or a closing statement after that, and then I have a couple more questions, and then we'll be adjourned. Gentlelady is recognized.
Thank you. I don't know what to do with all that time. Kind of freaked me out when you said that.
You can always yield it back to me.
Oh, no, I don't think I'm not giving up what's given to me. I'll tell you that much. You never know when you can get that, but I appreciate it, Mr. Chair. And I want to thank our witnesses for being here, each one of you. Thank you for expressing your ideas and your thoughts. And I did want to ask some follow-up questions, though, to some of those. Mr. Inspector General Horowitz, my colleagues across the aisle have said that the Inspector General found that the FBI intentionally weaponizing the security clearance process to purge conservatives from its ranks. Mr. Inspector General, did your office find that the FBI has a pattern or practice of misusing the security clearance adjudication process to purge certain FBI employees?
We have not made such a
They already asked this.
finding.
Okay. And also, there were allegations made that the FBI has weaponized this, any findings that it was related specifically to individuals who might have expressed sentiments with regard to January 6th. Did you find that?
We haven't made such a finding. We've actually, Congresswoman, had complaints come in from both sides on these issues. On one side, complaints about field offices not taking action in January 6 cases, and on the other side, complaints about offices that did take matters in January 6 cases.
So as usual, it's across the board of the political
We have
spectrum.
complaints from whistleblowers on both sides on that issue.
And that is par for the course you have found in the FBI and in your position over hearing from your other Inspector General officers that complaints may come from both sides of the political spectrum.
I've certainly seen, with regard to the DOJ law enforcement components, issues coming from various perspectives. I will say non-ideological, ideological complaints across.
What about religious? Have you made any findings that the FBI security clearance process targets Christians?
We've not made such a finding.
Or targeting military veterans?
We've not made such a finding.
Thank you. You know, I understand
They already asked all of those questions. He praises on them and spoke at their events. I believe he's blatantly lying. He could be lying. We never know. We'll have to see. We'll see what happens, I guess. The lady who died had complications that could easily have been remedied. She didn't need to die. Yeah, I'm with you. I mean, she did go to the hospital and they didn't find anything within 20 hours. I don't know. We were watching the Oprah interview yesterday about it, and we don't know if maybe she felt like she couldn't say that she took the abortion pill because it was illegal, and she thought maybe going to the ER and saying that she would get in trouble, or what happened, what the details were. It's kind of fuzzy, but yeah, I'm sure if she had better care, she probably would have been a lot safer. Paul, I agree she didn't need to die, but it sounded like a failure on the doctors, not due to an abortion ban, but due to incompetence. Yeah, that from the articles that we read yesterday, that's what it sounded like, was the doctors kind of failed her. But maybe those articles that we read weren't true. Maybe the sources were wrong. Without the families actually letting us know what happened, we're probably never going to know. And they've already hooked up with Kamala, so they're going to spin their narrative anyway. You know, they didn't want to go to jail. Yeah, I could see that being a thing. I could see that she was scared and didn't tell them what was going on. But the doctors, you know, I'm not going to go there because we don't have all the facts. I'm not going to go there.
Colleagues' concern that it would appear that Democrats are not taking the issue of whistleblowers seriously. And I think we do. We have a committee for that, the Oversight Committee, for which when I was a member of the Oversight, that's when I first met Mr. Horowitz, was in having oversight over different agencies. And
no, all good, Paul. And the thing is, we read those articles, but without the family actually telling us what happened, we don't know if those articles are even true. You know what I mean? And after watching them on Oprah yesterday, you don't want to ask the family details about it anyway, because obviously they're very sad. So that would be kind of fucked up. But it's, so who knows, man? She didn't tell the doctor she took the meds. We don't know. We have no idea. One article that we found said that the doctor issued her the meds and then she waited too long to go to the ER, and then she was there and didn't get treated until 20 hours had passed, which was too long, and she went septic and died. That was what one of the articles said. But really, at the end of the day, who knows? Who knows what actually happened? For all we know, she bought it online and then waited too long before she went to the ER. Sorry for being much of a lefty. No, man, you have a good point. You have a good point. We don't know. We don't know what happened. But the thing is, we can't say that it was because of a abortion ban either, because we don't know. We don't have enough details. Obviously, the Democrats are going to pick this up and try to spin it that way, and Republicans are going to come back and try and, you know, debunk everything. So who knows?
Questioning you about some of your findings there, some of which, when I first came to Congress, were targeted against a Democratic administration, at the time, the Obama administration. We've gone through a Trump administration. We're now in a Biden administration. And so the vagaries of political persuasion, you've seen them all. But I think the reason that the Democratic members have been bringing up Project 2025 and President Trump is because
they want to campaign. Yes, you are absolutely right, lady. They want to campaign. They want to get clips out there. They got to get those clips on YouTube and X to make sure their candidate looks the best they can, and screw that guy who's not getting paid.
It presents a global threat, a true weaponization of offices and of a position against the American people as a whole. We see places like North Korea, Hungary, Iran, now Venezuela, where those citizens could not have imagined 20, 30 years before, potentially, that they are living under a dictatorial rule. I went to school with individuals, I'm dating myself, in the early 80s with students who had fled Iran. I have been around young people in undergrad who have fled North Korea. And the notion that anything like that could happen in this country seems so antithetical to our thinking. But we cannot drop the ball in when we see an individual or a group of individuals who have power trying to take that control.
And it's hard to tell what publication shows favoritism and which side. For all we know, it could have been a COVID incident. We like and respect you, Paul. No hate here. Yeah, absolutely. Paul is the man. We have people coming from Idaho to Washington to get abortions, and Idaho wants to stop it. Why are we so worried about government weaponization now when it's going on for centuries? Exactly.
And it is our opinion, many of our opinion, that Trump, for his own purposes, has now joined forces with individuals who have offered Project 2025 as a means to an end for each one of their own desires. I would ask to submit to the record a CNN article. Trump claims not to know who is behind Project 2025. CNN review found at least 140 people who work for him are involved.
Objection.
Thank you. And in this article and in other places, we will see the nexus of relationships between the president and individuals who have written this. 6 of his former cabinet secretaries.
There we go.
4 individuals nominated by the former president as ambassadors. His first deputy chief of staff, my former colleague Mark Meadows, and also his longtime advisor, Stephen Miller, who were advising Project 2025. Federal Communications Commissioner under President Trump, Brendan Carr, Lisa Laurenti, who was a delegate to the United Nations Commission on the Status of Women, all wrote components of Project 2025. We have the American Accountability Foundation putting together a roster of current federal workers it suspects could impede Trump's plan for a second term. I would direct your attention to what we have up there on.
She brought a chart with her too.
On the screen, which shows so many associates who have in fact contributed to the transitional plan for a presidential Trump next term that are part of his orbit. Paul Dans, top official in Trump's White House. We have Ben Carson, former HUD secretary. Christopher Miller, acting Secretary of Defense. Peter Navarro wrote a section defending the former president's trade policies. This has been drafted as the next conservative president's last opportunity. The last opportunity for what? Not the America we know now, a different form of America, one that meets the demands of specific individuals, not all of us. One women that does not include us having complete autonomy of ourselves. One that puts a form of Christianity that may not be my form of Christianity. That's why we have a separation of church and state, so that we can all worship our God as we wish. That's not what Project 2025 is looking towards. Today, you may be part of it. Tomorrow, you may not be. Today, it may help you. Tomorrow, it may not. I know I'm on the front line. I know my community's on the front line, but tomorrow it may be yours. Next week, next month, 180 days he's given himself. 2 years from now, it may be your son, your daughter, pointing in the military, pointing a weapon at their fellow citizen, at their brother or their sister who are protesting on the streets of America. Because yes, in Project 2025, it allows the president to direct the active military to come to the streets of the United States against those that he deemed as political rivals. That's in Project 2025. Those are the things that are in there against us as Americans. And that's the reason why, Mr. Chairman, we keep talking about it. Not because whistleblowers' issues are not unimportant, but because this is a clear and present threat right now to the American people that we need to join forces with and stop. So I want to thank you for the additional time. And while we're on the recess, God bless you and your family. And I pray safety for all of us as members, all of people who have spoken out, and individuals we may not agree with one another, but I pray that this election goes safely and that we are all back here again to continue the people's business.
I agree. Just a few more questions, if I could. Mr. Horowitz, you said you've not seen a pattern, but you have found evidence, or let me do it as a question. Have you found any evidence of a focus on religion and vaccination status playing a role in discussions about clearance decisions?
We certainly did, as to Mr. Allen.
Of course. I mean, that's the whole point. I thought, his email questioning the leadership at the FBI, they used that. They used his vaccination status. They used his religion. I thought pretty soon they were going to accuse Marcus Allen of writing Project 2025. I thought that might happen. You didn't write Project 2025, did you, Mr. Allen? No, you had nothing to do with that. Mr. Levitt, you didn't either. Right, and I know Mr. Horowitz didn't have anything to do with that. Let's go to this questionnaire, because this questionnaire that was used by the FBI in these clearance discussions, I find very troubling. In the opening, in the sort of the preamble before they get to the questions, they say they're asking colleagues to rat on fellow colleagues. They say, you are being asked to provide information as a fact witness. Should you refuse to answer or fail to reply, action against your security clearance may be undertaken. So I find this amazing. Like, they're going to a colleague in a security clearance investigation. They're asking a colleague to talk about that individual, and if they don't, they're going to lose their security clearance. I mean, and then when you look at the questions, do you find that a little troubling, Mr. Horowitz?
I certainly find I'm not sure I find necessarily the questioning of individuals about allegations troubling. How you tell them about it and talk to them about it is concerning, as you indicated, and certainly the questions were highly inappropriate.
Certainly coupled together. Hey, we're doing a security investigation on Mr. Allen, as an example, and if you don't answer it, your security clearance is in jeopardy. Yeah. And oh, by the way, here's the question. Did Mr. Allen ever voice support for President Trump? Did Mr. Allen ever express concerns about the COVID-19 vaccination? Did Mr. Allen ever attend a gun rally? That is as troubling as it gets. And right at the top of this questionnaire, FBI Security Division, Security Integrity and Investigation Section, Clearance Investigation Unit. Mr. Levitt, have you ever seen anything like this?
Not before this last round of whistleblowers, but I do think the point I tried to make earlier is even if this questionnaire was only typed up by a couple of individuals, and to be clear, those are the same ones that were worried about the Kelly cart. So they're the same ones that were worried that they're right. Supervisors. But even in cases where this questionnaire wasn't used, we've heard from a number of whistleblowers that these types of things were asked about, and of course we know they factored into the decisions. And so I think it's not just about the questionnaire, right? I hope that the Inspector General's office will look at how all of these issues were focused on by leadership.
That's the element of fear, Mr.
I like how they're getting back to the issue now. They spent 2 hours talking about Project 25, and now they're just getting back to the actual issue. That's hilarious.
Allen just talked about in his last response to Mr. Bishop, the fear, that environment of fear. And this is it in practice right here.
It looks like the thing that's blacked out is just names and email, and their signature block on the email was blacked out, just deleting all the identities in it.
That is what is scary. So if that's not weaponization of government, earlier Ms. Crockett asked about, would the weaponization of government include certain things? It would certainly include this in the environment described by Mr. Allen, and it would certainly include the 27 months that he had to live through and the 24 months now Garrett O'Boyle has had to live through.
Yeah, the thing that you were actually there to talk about, the thing the committee was actually made for, not for you to campaign on.
Again, I want to thank you all for being here. Oh, Mr. Kirshner, would the weaponization of government include lying to the FISA court to spy on a presidential campaign? You got asked a series of questions. Would it include? I'm just curious if you thought that would be the weaponization of government.
Lying to a court, any court, FISA court or otherwise, is deeply troubling.
That wasn't the question. Would the weaponization of government include lying to a FISA court to spy on a presidential campaign?
I would suppose it could.
Could?
Yeah.
Oh, good. Okay. Would it include text messages written by people who were involved in that effort to spy on presidential campaign? Text messages like, don't worry, we'll stop Trump. Would that be the weaponization of government as well?
I think that's inappropriate language because we're supposed to be doing our work, apolitically, without fear or favor. So, I think that's ill-advised.
Sure was. It's so ill-advised. Mr. Mueller kicked those individuals off his team. So ill-advised that Kevin Kleinsmith got prosecuted for lying to the FISA court in order to go spy on a presidential campaign. That seems to me to be the weaponization of government as well.
I'm not trying to be like the tinfoil hat guy, but you see people coming out and they're talking about the FBI being pretty much Democrats and against Trump. And then you see the Secret Service and how they were pretty bad at stopping the first attempt on Trump. And then, like it kind of like the snowball conspiracy theory just kind of happens from there. I really want to see what this guy said or did. Yeah, we only have like small ideas of different websites that he sent. Bitch better have my money. They got a fat settlement too. Which one's got a fat settlement?
I'm going to thank all of you for being here. Mr. Allen, we really thank you. You're the one who's had to endure this, your testimony to the strength of your faith and your family, I think, is just inspiring. We appreciate your service to our country, service to this committee and to the country for telling your story and being willing to come forward and work with Mr. Levitt. Mr. Horowitz, we appreciate the work you've done over the years in getting this information to us. And with that, the committee stands adjourned.
All right, there it is.